The coronavirus pandemic has meant a reduction in the numbers of students at school just now. We have been open the whole period. We're looking after key worker children and vulnerable children, small groups of an average of 12 students in the whole school setting. We are still running our testing for our fire alarm and everything as is normal. We are now up to a maximum of 90 children, which is 25% of years 10 and 12 as per government guidance. The safety of the children is still paramount during as normal. We are still doing manual weekly fire drills or weekly fire tests, and we have done an evacuation through the period as per normal.
Anything else you can add to that from the fire industry side of things?
One thing we're hearing from members is getting access is to some degree is easier because schools are not as occupied, and it's easier to actually get access to carry out servicing work and maintenance work. And also it's also useful to remember that if schools are not as occupied as they normally are, lots of schools run quite a low category of fire alarm system because they are generally occupied by large numbers of people. But when only part of a school is being occupied because of reduced numbers, because we're only having key worker children in, it's always useful to remember that maybe a fire might start in a building that's now used to be occupied but is not occupied at the moment. So fire watches can be important.
Okay, and if we talk about the education sector as a whole, outside of this pandemic and the challenges given to us by the pandemic, what are the most important life safety considerations when selecting systems specifically for educational installations, educational buildings?
Well, from my side, early detection, so we can get everyone out of the buildings as quickly as possible. So I would say that's a key factor in the fire alarm system.
I'll probably say one of the things that is slightly forgotten about with schools is that lots of schools nowadays get used out of school hours. When you are, for community, they now become community hubs and they're very important locally. When we're thinking about that, then is the fire system sufficient for just that partial occupation? Because yes, you can probably have just a manual system in a school and it will be fine because there's a high number of people, high number of staff, everyone's awake, or they should be. And they can detect a fire quite fast by themselves, hit a manual call point and exit. But when they're being used as community centres and used for the community, parts of the building might be not occupied, therefore you need enhanced detection. So remote areas can have detection and warn people who are actually using the parts that are occupied. One thing I will say about schools that does get forgotten is the insurance requirement. Lots of schools, especially secondary schools, have an awful lot of IT equipment, which is not cheap. And has the insurance company had any input into the fire system? They might require that to be covered under a property category. And let's not forget that last year there were over 100 incidents of arson in educational premises. So arson is also a big risk to schools, it's not life safety, but it does affect schools.
Yes, just going on to what Will said, is a really good point and a valid one. In schools, what the room's being used for in the daytime of a night time with night classes could be something entirely different. A drama class may become an art class where they're using different types of equipment, maybe equipment that heats up, all kinds of things, so that the risk can be fluid and change from day to night. And again, we may need to consider what type of detection's installed and how we factor that when we're considering the design requirements for a school.
Yeah, I've noticed over the last couple of years, health and safety have just been using the keywords business continuity, and that's become a lot more prevalent in the education industry. like local councils are more worried about if there was a fire, how the school would then operate if it wasn't detected soon enough. And they are like increasing the grade of the level of design of fire protection they're putting in all schools. I noticed in Havering we've increased from L4 to L3. In Southend Borough we've gone up to L1 standard. So I have noticed over the last last couple of years that this has increased dramatically.
Dave, can I ask you a question about specialist environments within schools? You obviously have a lot of experience with schools, designing systems for schools and educational buildings. What specific high-risk environments would we find in educational buildings, do you think?
Science block, home economics classes, design technology classes. In this day and age, we've got laser cutting machines. The amount of products that they use that are dangerous in schools is like growing every year. I've got a number of schools where they've left appliances on that have caused little fires, but luckily due to the fabric of the building and the good housekeeping that the site teams kept the school in, these haven't spread across the property. However, they have still started. So one has to look at basically the appliances and the uses of the certain locations in the school.
With regards to FireScope Plus, which we've been installed at Campion, and obviously we've got a good case study for it, just by definition, BS 5839 and BS 52666 dictates that you'll be protecting escape routes. These are the vital conduits out of the building, if God forbid there is an issue. And by installing two disciplines into one area, you can really make significant savings on the installation. Reduce cable costs, less engineers in the building, which in the current climate is very important. The maintenance side of it, which Chris has well kindly touched on, because it's proactively self-tests on the emergency lighting, again, less engineering time, but the proactive approach of the system acknowledging if you've had an issue. What I really like about FireScope Plus is that you've got a combined system, and it occurs to me regularly that fire systems will obviously pick up smoke and escape routes, but unless the main supplier, be it the sub-main coming into the building or a local circuit breaker failure, unless the main supplier is compromised, you're not going to know, or the emergency lighting's not going to know to come on. It won't proactively come on. So you could have a scenario where you have escape routes compromised with smoke and no emergency lighting. If I'm in that building, I certainly want the emergency lights to come on. And of course, with FireScope Plus, just through simple cause and effect programming in the panel, we can make that happen. And I think that's really important. There's so many benefits to the system with regards to cost. And Dave mentioned the CO footprint. The CO footprint on it, by definition, as well, is absolutely minimal, because the system proactively interrogates itself and will only charge the batteries when they need charging. On a conventional system, the mindset can be, well, it's not on, so it's not costing me. But on the emergency lighting, you will have fittings constantly charging and constantly taking a charge, therefore producing CO, and in all honesty, costing the end user out of their budget. So there's many, many benefits to using FireScope Plus.
Yeah, I'm just very happy that the system has, like I say, having one fault in the last 18 months that it's been running in a big school like this with over 400, 500 points is quite an achievement as far as I'm concerned. Less than 0.2%, isn't it, of issues? So 99.8% success rate with all the devices, and even though that it is in quite a harsh environment with kids throwing bags at them and spraying drinks around, and in the changing rooms with deodorant, etc., and with the false alarms have been minimal, where we've changed the sensitivity of the devices in those kind of areas, the same as in the science blocks when they are doing experiments. We've managed to have no false alarms, no faults as such, and we're very happy.
Yeah, I'd like to say as well that what Dave says about myself and my staff having the ability to easily identify faults that we could rectify quite easily without having to call on Dave and Fisk all the time. the work and the effort that Dave and the team put in with me to actually get the system to a bespoke level for our school, as while we're still fully compliant, it is tailor-made for our school, and we're not getting the faults. And I have confidence that in the background, this is self-testing all the time, and we're safer than we've ever been.
I honestly think it is worth acknowledging that the false alarm rate has been achieved, because we often hear that false alarms, you can't cure false alarms. Oh, there's nothing we can do about false alarms, and it's not the case. By intelligent installers using intelligent kit and putting it in the right place and designing it and engineering it correctly, we can drive down false alarms, which in this case has been proven. It's brilliant to hear.